Hello there, my name is Jessica Westhead, and my new short story collection, Avalanche, is about the harm done by well-intentioned white people because of unconscious bias and the polite, quiet kind of racism that hides just under the surface of the everyday. Also, I am not cool enough to do this video without my notes. This book also examines how white people continue to center ourselves and our own comfort in conversations about racism and white supremacy and our role in it to avoid our feelings of shame about this. With these stories, I try to find a balance between laughing at the ridiculous lack of self-awareness of my white protagonists and also encouraging compassionate self-reflection from white readers, because maybe they might recognize something of themselves in some of these characters like I do. And I also have a lot of love for those characters. It needs to be said that none of my understanding about what I wanted these stories to do would have been possible without the work of the Black, Indigenous, and other racialized authors whose books and articles illuminated so much for me. One of those people happens to be Mohawk writer and editor and all-around lovely human, Alicia Elliott. In fall 2019, I had the honor and pleasure of meeting Alicia at the Cabot Trail Writers Festival when she was promoting her brilliant collection of personal essays, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground, and I was promoting my last novel, Worry. Before the reading Alicia gave, she shared her thoughts in reaction to the news that had just broken, that Prime Minister Trudeau and his government were fighting against compensating First Nations children and their families for the harm done to them by that same government and other federal governments before them. At the time, I didn't know what she was talking about. I had to look up the news later that night. A 2019 Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling had ordered Ottawa to pay the maximum human rights penalty for discrimination, $40,000 for each First Nations child and family member who had experienced racial discrimination through Ottawa's chronic underfunding of the on-reserve foster care system and other family services. And the federal government had decided to fight that order. Years later, the government eventually negotiated an agreement after it faced 2 class action lawsuits, including one launched by the Assembly of First Nations. The federal court recently approved a $23 billion settlement agreement for First Nations children and families who are harmed by discriminatory underfunding of the First Nations Child and Family Services Program, and those impacted by the federal government's too narrow definition of Jordan's Principle, which is a child-first principle to ensure First Nations children get the services they need when they need them. Alicia's words to the audience at that festival were moving, powerful, and open-hearted. And then she blew all of us away with a fantastic reading from A Mind Spread Out on the Ground. And now she has written a novel called And Then She Fell, and is absolutely incredible. The novel's protagonist, Alice, is a young Mohawk woman who has moved away from her community in Six Nations to live with her white academic husband and their new baby in a wealthy Toronto neighborhood. And then strange and unsettling things start to happen all around her, becoming more frightening and surreal as the story goes on. I kept marveling at how this book was so many things at once. A haunting and compelling psychological thriller, a compassionate reimagining of our limited and limiting ideas of mental health, an exploration of the gothic horror of modern motherhood, a pointed and often really funny critique of colonial systems of oppression, both obvious and insidious, and a multi-layered retelling of the Haudenosaunee creation story. This novel also made me think deeply about storytelling itself. At one point, Alice tells her husband Steve, sharing insight that she learned from her storyteller father, we have to be responsible to the people we're sharing these gifts with, just as much as we have to be responsible to the gifts themselves, because we don't know how long we'll have them otherwise. Also, there is a stunning twist at the end that I will not spoil for you. You should come to Ben McNally Books right now and buy And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott and read it immediately. Thank you.